Hello and welcome to Thoughts from the Movies, the original version. Back with us and now back in Pittsburgh, Justin Newton.
Hello.
Welcome home, buddy.
Thank you. It's great to be back, except this humidity sucks. But it's great to be here.
And as always, the ride or die, Austin Moorhead. Austin, how are you on this beautiful Memorial Day?
I'm doing well, guys. Sun's shining. Humidity, like Justin said, could be a little bit lower, but other than that, it's not snow, so I'm happy. So,
It's not necessarily a bad thing. So this week, we watched the 1966 classic, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, directed by Justin. You just tell me how to say this because I know I'm going to mess this up.
Sergio Leone, the great Italian spaghetti western director, actually the creator of the spaghetti western.
Awesome. Starring Clint Eastwood, Eli Walsh, and Lee Van Cleef. I think I got all those ones right.
Not too bad, yeah.
This
If you
was
didn't, they're probably dead, so they're not going to fight you.
right.
I guess.
This pick was Justin's, and it is 3 long hours of plot that is strung together with duct tape and gum bands. Uh, this
Yeah.
was one of my father's favorite movies.
Really?
Somehow,
Nice.
I really always thought he had a better taste in movies than this. But let's get into it, shall we?
Let's.
Because this is going to take forever to get through. So I guess, where do we begin?
Well, let me start because this was my pick, so I'll kind of intro it. So, so we did The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly from 1966. One of the most well-regarded classic westerns of all time, spaghetti western, as we mentioned before. The reason I chose this one was we haven't done a western yet, and this one is sort of a classic, if not the seminal western. So it's sort of it started a genre. As we mentioned, Sergio Leone was really credited with bringing spaghetti westerns into cinema back in the mid 60s out of the Italian movement. So the reason they were called spaghetti westerns is because a lot of the crew and cast were all from Italy or Spain, from that region. So it was sort of derogatory spaghetti in Italian, but it was all Italian based. And we'll get into more of that later. But yeah, I chose this one because it's a classic for everything that it represents in terms of the genre. And like you said, 3 hours, and man, is it long. I mean, it felt like every second of this thing was just dragging. And there's some interesting things that I want to talk about later. But first, let's talk about the genre of westerns. Do you guys watch a lot of westerns? I'm not a western guy, which is why this kind of was like, let's do something different. They don't make them anymore. I'm not usually one to watch the genre. So how do you guys feel about those in general to start?
I know that my grandmother was a big Western moviegoer. She owns like all the old classics on VHS still. I can't say I've seen too many. I think I've seen one, and I don't even know if you really put Western at the forefront of its genre, and that's Django Unchained.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's about the only Western that I have seen prior to this.
Nice.
Okay.
Josh?
So, because as I stated, this was my dad's favorite movie, or one of them, I have seen a fair number of westerns. And like movies like Shane are awesome. The Magnificent Seven, True Grit, Red River. I mean, there are some actually really good western movies. Um, John Wayne, obviously, like anything John Wayne's in is worth at least like watching half of. Um, and then you look at like current westerns, right? So like The Country for Old Men, Django, pretty much anything Tarantino does. Um, there's definitely a symbol or style of storytelling that I really liked in westerns. This, however, was not.
Yeah, this one was it was a little tough because, and you guys both mentioned Tarantino, and I'm going to talk about that a lot in a little bit. But this one was tough for me to get through because it felt like it took a long time to get into the actual story of it, right? The real story is supposed to be these three guys going after this bounty of gold that was hidden in a grave somewhere, $200,000, right? And it takes like an hour before that even comes up. You know, there's all this stuff at the beginning of the movie that it's like just set up an exposition, and it's like it doesn't really come into play at all. Like it feels unnecessary, and it just I don't know if we watched the extended edition or what, but it was just monstrously long.
You could
like it was just hard for me to get into. I think is the problem because of it, dragging.
Yeah, there were some. I will say this: I had to watch this 2 nights in a row. Not the whole thing. I split it up into 2 days. I'd watch like an hour and a half for one day and then an hour and a half the next day. And honestly, I feel like they could have just left out the first hour and a half of the movie and I would have been fine.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
The whole style.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a little tough. And I will say mostly because I felt like the plots of the characters kept switching back and forth. And I'll talk about that more like as we get into this. But it almost felt like you didn't know who to trust, what the end game was. And maybe that's like keep yourself on your toes momentum. But
I mean, yeah, like if it's I don't know, like Reservoir Dogs, then yeah, it's fun. Like until Michael Madsen's character reveals himself to be the bad guy, like it's fun not knowing who to trust. This was just painful because you needed somebody to cheer for. It was I desperately wanted somebody to root for, and the guy who ends up getting the most screen time, Tuco, is probably the character I least care about.
Well, what's ironic is that Clint Eastwood's character is the good of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well,
he
yeah.
actually kills the most people of the three main guys. His body count is the highest of all three of them. So I didn't understand how he was supposed to be the good guy, but he was, and he ended up killing more people than both Tuco and Angel Eyes combined, which is weird. But let me ask you this, because this is sort of considered to be part of an unofficial trilogy of movies called the Dollars Trilogy, with the first movie being A Fistful of Dollars, the second movie being A Few Dollars More, and this being the third, which is actually a prequel to those movies. Now, Sergio Leone didn't intend for them to be a trilogy, but people over the years have sort of looped them together because of Clint Eastwood being in all three and him being known as the character with no name. I guess just in each film, he doesn't have a real name. This one, obviously, he's Blondie, which is a nickname. And I think he's Joe or John in the others. So, and you guys have never seen either of those movies, correct?
Maybe A Fistful of Dollars. I've seen like half awake, but not like actually sat down and watched it.
Right. Yeah. Neither have I. But yeah, this one it was cool, I guess, in the sense of just being a classic. But it was very tough for me to get into the story. Once they got into the actual story, like say we take out that first hour, and then we have the 2 hours of them each trying to get their gold and everything. Did you guys get more into it at that point once we had a clear sort of goal and objective, or was it still like you were too far gone at that point?
Josh, you want to hit this one first?
I think I lost all interest when I realized that it was centering around the Revolutionary War. And then I was like, well, where are they? Because, like, there's no deserts, like, on the east coast of America where the Revolutionary War was fought. So how far west are they? And
well, it's the Civil War in this
one. I'm sorry, Civil War, not Revolutionary War. But, like, still, America has not really been settled that far, right? West? So like,
I don't know history well enough to know if that's true, but I think I agree with you saying. Like, you think Civil War, it's like the North and the South on the east parts.
right,
You don't think of it being in like Arizona or wherever it's supposed to take place.
and they're like in a desert, so they're in like at the very east, Texas, if not Mexico, Arizona, like Nevada, like that's where the landscape and like the Wild West is set up. So like I'm just like the entire time very confused by like why is it the Civil War, like what's the Civil War have to do with this? Why is it happening in the middle? And then them flip flopping sides throughout it. Like I'm so busy trying to keep track of people's names and like who's working with who at what points that like I don't think I ever get fully into the movie. I don't know if I answered
I feel like you did.
it. Okay.
Yeah, no, definitely. Austin, do you feel like you got more into it after the plot came out?
I mean, there are definitely a lot of points in the film that are really tough for me to get through, but I understood there was a clear plot, and at least that hopefully, and it did, that the movie would resolve that plot. I'm wondering if the director saw his own interpretation of using the Civil War in this. I'm wondering if that's why it's a little off, but I don't know. Overall, I got it, but there were still a lot of tough things to chew through for me.
Definitely. I would agree with that. And it's like there's so many side things happening that distract from that main plot of trying to get the gold that it becomes just like disorienting. And you're like, why are we here for like 20 or 30 minutes? Like, what are we doing here? Like when he's at the mission with the priest, or like
Yeah.
when they're towards the end, when there's like that big battle over the bridge, which was like 30 or 40 minutes, and it's just like you said, Josh, all about the war. You're like, all of a sudden, like we're in the war. Like what is this for? Like I get they need the bridge, but it seemed like there just was so much that was not necessary for just like the actual story.
And I think I like the beginning. Like I like that Clint Eastwood, Tico and Blondie are like running this scheme, right? Like just collecting the ransom money everywhere, or the reward money everywhere, and like Angel Eyes is like the mysterious guy. We're not really sure who he's on, what side he's on. He's aware of the racket they're running, and he kind of like acknowledges it as like being cool or whatever. Like that's a cool way to introduce the characters. And then there's a whole bunch of shit I don't care about, and then there's a gunfight in a cemetery.
Yeah, definitely agree. Like when they're in the desert, it's like you're walking for like 10, 15 minutes, and you're like, all right, just. And at the end of the day, that like, I mean, that's how they find Bill Carson there, but it seemed like they didn't need to take that long to get to that point. Like
Yeah, it was just torture porn.
Yes.
Like before torture porn was invented, it was torture porn. Because
Right.
like it's really uncomfortable for them.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that the director wanted to do with this movie is that before this, the Western genre had been very romanticized, and it had been very toned down in terms of the violence, and it had been a lot of like, cool looking cowboys getting the girl and like all these good things. What he wanted to do was show a lot more of the dirty, violent, criminal side of what the Wild West was like, which in the 30s and 40s, Westerns hadn't really done that. So this was sort of the beginning of anti-heroes, and like you said, a lot of the blood and a lot more of the graphic violence, which this one, I was surprised actually. I wasn't expecting it to be as graphic as it was in a lot of those scenes. Even like the makeup of seeing, Clint Eastwood after the desert,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
It was all messed up. Like it's pretty, graphic.
Yeah, this movie definitely accomplished that. If they were trying to move away from the romanticized angle, I wouldn't let a kid watch this. That's for sure.
And Josh, you said you watched it with your dad?
Oh
I guess?
yeah, so I definitely was a kid that watched it.
Yeah. Another interesting thing about it is that because so much of this cast was Spanish and Italian, and especially the director who didn't speak a lot of English there, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but a lot of the dubbing was clearly off with the
Oh,
audio.
it's so
Much-
bad.
like, at first, I was like, is my TV off, or like, and then it did it for so long. I'm like, maybe that's just like a restored version or whatever. But then looking back, I was reading about it afterwards, and it turns out the way that Sergio Leone shot his movies and a lot of other Italian directors did is they just dubbed everything. Like everyone was speaking in their native language. So it's like the people on screen are actually speaking like Spanish and Italian or French or whatever. And that's all just dubbed over afterwards. And now I was like, oh, that makes sense as to why like nothing was lining up except for the main guys who actually spoke English, those three.
Yeah, this definitely felt like when I would watch like a very bad anime that was like dubbed over, and you could tell it's like, ugh. Or like even like the most recent Netflix films that are foreign. Like some of them, you're just like, okay, that's clearly not the words he's speaking. Like that's kind of how I felt for this. So yeah.
See, again, but then I also wonder because there's that whole part where Eli Welch is like recruiting the gang of Mexicans. God, I almost forgot that happened. That's how long this movie is. I forgot like key parts of it. But he's like recruiting them, and like when he's like sitting at the well alone, like it feels like piecemeal. Like part of it feels like ADR, part of it feels like it was recorded on set, part of it feels like it was like on camera somehow, Mike's like, or like somebody was like standing in the back of the set. I don't know. It was really it bothered me, the constant changing of audio quality in the way they speak.
Yeah, it was certainly not fluid, and I think that's part of a staple of that genre, though, is that they all just kind of, I mean, it being out in the desert, I think it was hard to get solid audio anyway with the amount of wind or noises, nature, it would be tough to get clear audio as it was, so they just said, we'll do most of this later. But let me bring this up because this is something I found really interesting the further I watched.
Keep going. I'll be back.
Oh, okay. Well, Austin, we'll start this one then, while Josh is whatever. But as I was watching the movie, the further into it I got, the more I realized how similar it was to Tarantino's movies, and you could see the influence. We really need Josh for this because he's a big Tarantino guy, so we need to just wait, I think.
I get what you're saying though, because it almost felt like when I was watching Django, you would have that key piece that you're trying to go through, and it almost not to bring it into a different perspective other than movies, but it literally felt like a video game. Like you have this certain one campaign, and you have all these side quests that you lumber off and do that aren't related to the story at all.
Right.
It felt like that, but yeah, now that he's back, let's bring it in.
So, Josh, what I was saying was the further into the movie I got, the more I saw Tarantino in this work. And he has said a lot of times over the years how big a fan he is of the spaghetti western genre. He's done Django Unchained, which was a spaghetti western, Hateful Eight, which had western vibes to it. I didn't realize that he considered this to be one of the best directed films ever and was one of his personal favorite films. But the more I watched it, the more I felt it was similar to the movies Tarantino does because A, it's crazy long, and it doesn't need to be that long. B, you have all these parts of the plot that feel bloated and unnecessarily long, and then sort of contribute to the ending, but don't really, if you think about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if you guys saw that, there's that whole chunk where Brad Pitt goes to Spahn Ranch for 45 minutes in the middle, and you're like, okay, whatever, it's there's always these pieces in his movies that are just completely cool scenes for half an hour, but don't really, matter to the whole thing. And then, with a really actually cool, interesting ending to it. But I just felt like I was watching a Tarantino movie, and I could see why this influenced him in so many of his movies, like Reservoir Dogs or Inglourious Bastards, whatever you call it. So now that I'm saying it, do you guys see any of this movie specifically or this genre in Tarantino's movies? Because like I said, he's been very clear that this movie and this genre was a heavy influence on him, and I felt it the more that I watched. As I was going along, I'm like, I see it now. I get it.
Yeah. I'll go first because I know Josh probably has a lot of influence, so I won't take too much time on it. But I would say, yeah. Like I said, you have the plot, like just specifically, like talk about Django real quick because that's how it felt for this. It felt like there's certain plot, and you have all these different, almost like a pinball machine of like different side things, and that's what he does in the movies. Also, which you did not mention, is the amount of, I wouldn't call it gore, but Tarantino implies that later in the style. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this movie was considered, like you said, like a jump off from the romanticized like Western and showing more influence of dirty fighting and blood. And if you don't see that in Tarantino films these days, I don't know what film you're watching, because Django had an enormous amount, and Inglourious Basterds had a lot of blood and violence. Mm-hmm. Reservoir, like, it's crazy.
Sure.
But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. Let's bring it over to Josh.
Oh, and also, before you get into it, Josh, I will say the music, too, because the score on this one, iconic, right? Amazing score on this. Ennio Morricone, who actually went and did the Hateful Eight score and won the Oscar for it after stepping away from a very long time, and one of the most well-regarded composers of the genre. But yeah, like the music here, and obviously Tarantino has many iconic use of music in songs in his soundtracks as well. So yeah, there's just a lot of elements that I pulled from it. And Josh, I mean, you didn't have too much time to digest, but what do you think about that?
So, Tarantino writes everything. And Sergio, I'm just going to use the first name because I know I can say that, wrote this movie as well. So, as far as like director who writes the script kind of thing, awesome, right? That's definitely a Tarantino statement. I think I feel like I understand where Tarantino borrows the composition of his stories from a little bit better now, because this does have a lot of background on characters has to happen on screen before the plot can begin. That's a Tarantino thing. I think like if I was going to go one for one, the movies where I directly see this movie being an impact is actually Kill Bills. I think the Kill Bills have a lot of that, like, bloated, unnecessary moments and a lot of really weird, like, scenes that, like, kind of at the end pay off, but never, like, not really. Like the fact that Tuco's parents died, like, that never, I don't know, like, I thought maybe that would turn Tuco good, but in the end, he's still trying to screw people over. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of weird stuff like that, and that's very similar to Kill Bill. And obviously, in Death Proof, the Grindhouse double feature, Kurt Russell's just doing an impersonation of Lee Van Cleef in this movie. That to me, like, the first, like, I think, second note I wrote down, Lee Van Cleef worked with Kurt Russell on Escape from New York. Clearly, Stuntman Mike is just an ode to Angel Eyes. That stood out. But I think, like, if you wanted to take a current movie or a movie that's relatively new and compare it to this, I compare it to The Revenant. Okay. Where, like, there's a lot of shit that happens. Not all of it makes a lot of sense, and there's a bunch of characters you're introduced to for a scene, and then you never see them again. And, like, you kind of know who your good guys and your bad guys are, but, like, at the end of the movie, you're still not quite sure. And, like, yeah. So that would be my, like, I understand where Tarantino comes into play here because, like what Dustin said. But I don't know that I've seen this movie in Tarantino movies. Like, I can't go like, oh, yep, that's that.
Interesting. And The Revenant is a good comp because it is not only the length of it, but the size and scale of it, also taking place mostly in nature with these sprawling landscapes and, these journeys across all this terrain and everything. And also one thing that I think I will say about this movie, and has happened occasionally in Tarantino movie, and The Revenant, is that the first 2 hours, 2.5 hours, the very big chunk of it is hard to get through. But then the last 20 or 30 minutes, I actually really enjoyed. Like when they're finally at the graveyard and they're all there doing their standoff and everything, like that 15 or 20 minutes at the end, I was really into. Like it was tense, it was well shot. I mean, it was just incredible, right? And I've seen that like in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where like the Manson thing at the end is fucking great and justifies the previous like hour and a half of whateverness. So like, The Revenant, where Tom Hardy and Leo finally catch up to each other. That battle at the end justifies the previous 2 hours of climbing through the dirt or whatever, So that's an interesting one. And were you as into the ending, I suppose, as I was? Because I thought that not only was it insanely well shot and edited with the music and everything, but the tension with the characters all being there at the same time. I was really into that whole scene. That sequence, I should say.
Awesome.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like you said, you have a sense of not like dicking around, but like going through the story. And finally you have your standoff that you've wanted between, your three characters, the title of the film, Good, Bad, the Ugly. What's going to happen? I enjoyed it, especially. I did thought that they were going to use the score, though, as they were like looking like from eye to eye, that they've been, I don't know how many times that score played in this movie before we got to there, and I thought they would come back to it. And maybe the director was like, maybe we put it in too many times. Maybe we don't want to do that this time. But I enjoyed it. The ending, I enjoyed the sequence of it. I actually really, and this will be my last note, I thought I really enjoyed the fact that it almost essentially went from eyes to then the hands on the gun, and that just kept going in that sequence.
Mm-hmm.
You never saw like anything prior or after besides that.
Yeah, and it just speeds up. It's like it just slowly gets faster and faster and builds and builds and builds until it climaxes. But
yeah.
So
also, Tarantino has said, Josh, that is his favorite edit in all of cinema. When it cuts to that wide scene and it's the circle of all three of them in the standoff, that is his favorite cut in the history of cinema. And it is a beautiful fucking shot. Like, it's insanely well composed. It is beautiful.
I almost hate this.
What, the movie?
But I my guy, who's been my guy since we were 15 or 16, Justin. Like, whenever I saw Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs for the first time, I was like, "That's my dude. He can do no wrong." And I just don't get this movie. Like, I didn't even care about the ending. My brain is like,
weren't into the ending at all.
No, because my brain's like, wait, how did Angel Eyes get there if they blew up the bridge? Was he in front of them? How did the Union soldier get past the Confederate army on the other side of the bridge? Why wasn't he caught up in that war? That's so much shit. And why did they need to blow up the bridge if they could just swim across the river anyway?
Right?
Yeah. They could have just let them keep fighting and snuck across. Were they thankful that the Union general didn't kill them? I don't understand. I don't understand. And the entire time, he's running through all those gravestones, right? And I'm just expected to believe that he just miraculously finds that one out of thousands of stones, and then it's not even that one. It's actually this one that's the unknown one. And why would Clint Eastwood write it down on a rock? Why wouldn't he just shoot them? He has the advantage. Let them run over to the one that you told them it was, and just go to the unknown one yourself and pick it up and leave. What?
You're not wrong, my friend. You are not wrong in any of this.
So, was it beautiful? Yeah. Was the editing cool? Sure. But, I'm so frustrated by the lack of storytelling and, ability to string together a plot that makes any sense. That, the entire movie, I'm just, trying to fill in the pieces that are left out and, almost forget to enjoy the visual of it.
Right. Well, there's two words that describe a movie like this, and they both have very different connotations because they represent different things, right? Uh, there is the word bloated, and there is the word expansive. Now, in certain movies like this that are supposed to be epic in nature, there is a lot of this stuff on the side to sort of add to that feeling of bigness, or it's like the shots of all the wilderness are very grand, very wide, very majestic, and it just feels very big, right? And then you have all these different elements to the story, so it's not just a cut and dry like two guys walking. Oh yeah, we buried some gold, blah blah blah. Oh, there's the gold shootout, blah blah blah. Like all these side pieces and subplots are intended to just create a bigger feeling about the epicness of this movie, because on their journey they get caught up in so many different things and distracted by so many different points, right? So it depends how you look at it. Now, I'm on your side, I think, in that I think it's bloated, in that like a ton of this stuff is unnecessary and distracted me from enjoying the actual plot of the movie. But I'm not going to pretend like there aren't other movies that are way, longer than they need to be and are just cool in themselves, like Christopher Nolan. You look at a movie like Interstellar, which was sort of along the same lines of just like insanely long and has all these different things, but it adds to the how big the story feels when you're done with it. So I get what he was trying to do, but I think I'm on your side in that for me it didn't really have the effect that was probably intended.
Lord of the Rings is expansive.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah, like Lord of the Rings, you're always interested and you never feel like anything is unnecessary, whereas this one, a lot of it felt like it could have been streamlined. And again, like the best example I think is towards the end when there's that big battle between the Confederates and the Union guys, right? It's a cool scene. It's epic. There's tons of extras. There's big ass explosions that damn near killed Clint Eastwood, and like all this stuff is coolly done. But if you just took it out, like it's just such a distraction. It's like they're going to get the gold. Wait a sec, 40-minute battle scene, and like you said, they can just swim across the river at any point, right? So like, why do we need that other than it's cool looking?
Well, and like those kind of scenes happen in movies like Braveheart and like Last of the Mohicans. Not necessarily mean to make two Mel Gibson references, but you know what I mean. Like those big war movies can have that, but like I would have spent that time with them searching for the stone and like cutting back to Angel Eyes, like watching them from afar, or like I don't know, like the expansiveness, like instead of so when Tuco kidnaps Blondie and he's like, "What'd you say to me? It's 100 miles from town. A man of your stature should be able to make it," like that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So like I believe him that it's 100 miles. You did not need to show me them walking all of those 100 miles.
Right.
Like, I believe you.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, you could argue in a sense of going back to Lord of the Rings, like for this movie, they swim across the river. Lord of the Rings, they could just ride the eagle to Mordor, but it's about the quest. And I feel like the quest for the Lord of the Rings was interesting enough to keep that going, whereas like the plots for this didn't really, or the subplots so to speak, didn't really interest from what I'm getting from you guys.
Yeah. I mean, Gandalf didn't have the power to tell you he doesn't kill his Gandalf the White, but you know what, that's besides the point. We won't get into that.
It's a whole other tangent.
We'll save that for Lord of the Rings.
But I think I agree. And with the comparison to Lord of the Rings, though, that movie from the get-go, you pretty much know what the object is and what the quest is going to be, and Frodo and like all the characters and everything. This, like we talked about, it's like a fucking hour of watching random other piece of another movie, and then it's like, oh, now we're in the desert and this guy buried some gold. Then it gets into like I really think that if they just cut out that first hour or like trimmed it to 5 minutes, a little bit of exposition, and then just went from there, I think I would have really, really enjoyed that movie because it would have all fit together better. It would have been slimmed down and made more sense.
How confused were you when they spent 45 minutes of this movie about talking about this Bill Carson character, right? And you're
Yeah,
like, this Bill
yeah,
Carson guy, he's gonna be important. Nope.
yeah.
He's
You know,
totally worthless.
big old red herring there. But yeah, like that's how the movie starts, right? With Angel Eyes, and he's like killing the people, and I'm trying to like figure out like, all right, Bill Carson, he's now bounty hunter, is double crossing this, and like these guys are running the scheme, and like they looking for Bill Carson? Like, yeah, that was definitely weird. And then like they brought him back 40 minutes later, and you're like, oh yeah, he's the guy that they were looking for or whatever.
Well,
Yeah, there
and
were
then
like
like
long stretches.
Bill Carson is supposed to be this like kick-ass Confederate rebel, right? So when
He seemed like a kind of a bitch. Like he just he was dying in the desert.
well,
He's
but
like, oh, by the way, I buried all this gold. Like,
I thought the Union was chasing Bill Carson's company through the West. That was the whole plot from the war, wasn't it?
I have
No? Okay. So the way I understood it was that Angel Eyes was hired by the Union to like hunt down Bill Carson. And like the Union's driving west to like finish off what's left of the Confederates, led by Bill Carson.
hmm
Okay? And so then like when Bill Carson, who's actually Tuco, was kidnapped by the Union, you would think there would be like this giant celebration, like we got him, like it's over. But instead, they're just like Angel Eyes is like, nah, treat him fine, and they're all like, okie dokie, and I don't.
See, I thought that Bill Carson was just some random dude, and like his guys, and he stole a bunch of gold. Like the beginning, I was really sort of out of it at the beginning. Like when Angel Eyes is doing his first murders, like he like kills the one guy who pays him to kill the other guy.
Oh
And he kills
yeah,
them both.
wait a
And
minute.
the second guy is the one who told him about Bill Carson. Like I don't know who Bill Carson is other than he's the dude who buried the gold. Like Tuco was just pretending to be him. He's not
Right,
actually.
right.
But I don't know. I don't remember like what his place in the world was other than he was the guy who stole the gold.
No, you're absolutely right. He had nothing to do with the Union. Or the
I think
Confederates.
he was a Confederate soldier. I think
Oh wait, he was?
because remember
Yeah.
they stole his uniform. He had the gray uniform that they stole in like the carriage.
Well,
Him and his buddies.
I don't.
That's where they find him. They find him like completely like beaten up and dehydrated, and he's just like, yeah, just give me some water and I'll tell you where the gold is and everything. And then he's just dead when he walks back with the water. It's that quick.
Yeah, and Clint Eastwood and Tuco, they put on the Confederates uniforms, and then
I
they get
remember.
captured by the Union soldiers, and that's where Angel Eyes is hanging out. However, the hell he got there, and was just like chilling with those guys.
Can we talk about the beginning of the movie for like 1 second?
Sure.
Did you guys see my pet peeve? Put out.
What? No establishing shot?
There were lots of wides actually in this movie. There were a lot of wides. I was talking about that.
Yeah, all those landscapes.
The just random POV shot when the wife faints. Only POV shot in the movie. Only
Yeah.
one in the movie. No, you don't fucking need it. She could have just fainted.
I don't remember what that family's purpose was anyway.
That family was
She just
from
told Angel Eyes about the fucking Bill Carson guy.
Right.
That's it.
Although, you know what though? I do remember, back to Tarantino for a sec, I remember thinking as I was watching that scene, like the opening scene in the movie where Angel Eyes is interrogating this dude who's like terrified. It did remind me of Inglourious Basterds,
Absolutely.
100% of Hans Landa and that French guy. I was like,
Wait,
yeah, in terms of like, you could feel the tension of like the powerful guy and the dude who's about to get killed or whatever.
Yeah, and like kids were hiding and like.
Right,
yeah,
right.
I mean, the whole thing was definitely.
But
That's almost this. No, I won't say shot for shot, but definitely the concept's the same.
right. But yeah, the beginning of the movie for me is just kind of like a blur of stuff I don't remember that seemed unnecessary anyway.
But that pays off. In Glorious Bastards, he then chases the same woman for the rest of the movie.
Right.
And, like, it's kind of like that where like he chases Bill Carson for half the movie to never actually catch him. I hate
Yeah.
that.
What did you guys think of Angel Eyes? What's interesting is the movie is, I think it's billed and presented as a trio movie, but it's really kind of a two-hander between Tuco and Clint and Blondie, right? But and Angel Eyes is like you said, Josh, they all kind of keep switching sides and double crossing each other. But I guess Angel Eyes would be more of the antagonist if you had to pick one of the three. But like, he just went through these very long absences in the movie where he would just show up again, and that felt very awkward to me. Like at the beginning, we start the movie with him, and then he disappears until he shows up again at the Union camp in like the Union uniform and captures the guys. And then after like they all have that shootout in the town where Tuco and Blondie kill all of his guys, and then he's like, "I'll see you at the graves, losers," or idiots, whatever he says. Then he just disappears again for another 45 minutes until he shows up at the cemetery. So it's like, what the heck was this guy doing the whole time? Like, where was he? He just popped out when it was convenient to the story, which I wasn't really digging.
Yeah. It's almost like you said, it was based on essentially that this would be a trio movie, but it's really just two mains and a side, honestly, at that point. I don't think he really, he's put in where he's needed. He really doesn't have any character development, if any. He's the one, if you had to pick, the good, obviously, Clint Eastwood, the protagonist, and then, in my mind, Tuco is more of an inconvenience, honestly, because you don't know if he's playing good or bad, and then he's a shit the whole time during it, and then you have Angel Eyes, who comes in and he's essentially like the antagonist, but for only when he's needed to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this maybe feels the most Tarantino of everything. Lee Van Cleef's a badass actor, and every word he said that came out of his mouth was fucking cool, right? And that, I think, is the most Tarantino thing ever, is to elevate a character just because you like the actor, right? That's a Tarantino thing. A side note, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, starring Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne, and Lee Van Cleef is in that movie as well. Probably pretty badass movie. Those are pretty kick ass.
Yeah. Well, Lee Van Cleef, too, he was in Fistful of Dollars, which none of us have seen, but he was in that movie, but he was like a really good guy. I don't know if he was like a lawmaker or whatever, but he was like one of the heroes of that movie. So it would be interesting.
Also in for a few dollars more.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to go back and see how he played, the other side of things. But like you said, yeah, he is a badass, and he feels, menacing, and the way he looks and the lines that he has are very, adds to the character for sure. But
you could put that in as well for Tarantino's for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, how Leonardo DiCaprio's character, every time he played in a Western, he was the bad guy. He was never the good guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like the actors for these had very specific roles that they were entitled to play, and because essentially I think that's the only thing they knew how to do.
Did it bother anybody else too that Eli Walsh is clearly not Mexican?
I don't know if he was supposed to be Mexican or if he was just really tan.
No, because he's all he'll throw in there a bad Spanish word every once in a while. He's like amigo, or says stupid shit like that all the time, and I'm like, okay, so this is just cultural appropriation just for funsies. I don't understand.
Yeah, I think he was designed to be Mexican, and I don't think they put it off too well. I think
because his brother's name is Pedro or something, isn't it?
Yeah, and he even says, God, I took 2 years of Spanish. Brunta or Bruta, which I think is witch in Spanish. I think he says that in there.
Father, yeah, and his brother's name is Father Pablo Ramirez. Very good.
That's Tuco's brother, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
You said Angel Eyes was supposed to be Mexican.
No, I said Eli Walsh. is
Oh,
clearly not Mexican.
I thought he was. Oh, I got my characters mixed up.
Yeah,
You're saying
right.
Tuco is not really Mexican?
No,
Oh, that's interesting. I
no.
didn't get that
He
at all.
was born in Brooklyn, New York.
Nice. Really tan Brooklynite.
Yes.
Interesting. Well, I didn't catch that. But that, I mean, that was super common back in those days. Even if it, in like Aliens, which was 20 years after this, that one chick is totally in brown face. So
Sure.
back then, I suppose. But that didn't bother me. But I think that Clint Eastwood did say that he didn't care for uh, his character here. And no characters in the movie had any arc whatsoever except for Tuco.
Yeah.
Like Blondie, nothing. Even Tuco's arc is like, he just kind of is the same guy. Like, I don't feel like he goes through much of a change at all, which is another reason that it's hard, like you said, to root for any of these guys, because they're all just as they need to be in any certain day and any certain moment. So, I don't know. But, yeah.
It's not a great movie. This might be the worst movie we reviewed, and we reviewed Space Jam. I mean, like, it's not great. It's
Yeah.
really not great. Like, Evil Dead was better than this. I'll go out there and say that right now.
Yeah. Well, you have to put things into perspective in terms of the time and the genre and all these different things. Like, this was 60 years ago, right? And this was sort of the start of a new genre of movies. So it's hard to compare it to too many other things, especially for us, because we didn't grow up with Westerns at all. And, this was just a different, totally different style of filmmaking. So it's one of those ones where it's like, it's so well regarded by almost like universally, right, considered to be one of the greatest of the genre. But for us, it's hard to connect to in a lot of ways.
And you even have some elements of the comedy. I don't know if I laughed the first time when he's trying to be hung and then he shoots it, and then he shoots like 3 hats off of people, and it just makes that silly sound. And then after a while, I'm like, okay, it's the same shtick. Like, but it was funny for the first part.
Right. Yeah. So.
I'm now just like going through and like looking at spaghetti western on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Just trying to find. I don't know. I hated it. I just hated it, and I'm bummed that I hated it, but I hated it.
Wow. Strong words.
I can't believe we spent 3 hours watching it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like that made me a better film watcher. I don't feel like that gave me any entertainment. I just got, like, it felt like a chore to watch it. And that's not how I feel about the movies we watch. When we watch a movie, like, I'm excited to sit down and watch it, review it. Like, I make all my notes. Like, my notes are going from, like, paragraphs, right? And then by the end of it, it's like one sentence, like, then they're attacked by the Union. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's how little I ended up caring about this movie, and it just feels like.
yeah. I think you're not far off from what I felt in terms of chore being the right word. Like, it's hard for me to. I'm not the kind of moviegoer or movie watcher who will get distracted by anything like phones, bathroom, whatever. But here it was like barely halfway into the movie, and I'm already like making dinner while I'm watching it. Like, I'm just like, just let it run, and I'll get the bullet points. Like, yeah, I kind of felt the same, which I hate to do, but agreed. I respect it for what it is and what it represented personally, but I should say personally, it's why I'm not really into westerns all that much, I guess.
What else did you have, Dustin?
I think that's about it on my end. Did you like the music? I mean, it's very iconic. Do we have to talk about that for a second? Did you like the score? Oh, it was so close to being like comical when but it was I thought it was actually very, very cool and very fitting, and I enjoyed it immensely.
I can't separate it from its use in parodies now. Like, I was like, oh, this is where that comes from.
Yeah.
But I was also like, oh, this is like Family Guy anytime there's a standoff in Family Guy. Or like, whatever dumb, Like literally, like the whole beginning scene where Tuco jumps out that window and they're having like the classic spaghetti western standoff in the middle of the town and like the tumbleweed and like I'm like this is it.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Right. That is the trouble with these older movies. It's like if you've seen so many parodies or so many uses in other ways, when you actually hear when it started, what it was meant to be like cool and surprising and all this stuff, you're like, I can't even get into it now.
And I think to Austin's point too, it was overused. Like if they used it every time the character was in trouble, like Clint Eastwood's character was in trouble, then I one know who the main character is, two I know like what that sound means. But like they just threw it in there like willy nilly. They're just like, hit the music. Like it sounded like all right, buckle up kids. So on RuPaul's Drag Race,
Oh boy.
they have a thing called the shade button. Okay? And it's this like it's a noise where it's like a rattlesnake tail kind of sounding noise. And it's like anytime somebody's like mean to somebody, like you hear the shade button, right? And it like it gets to a point where it's comical on RuPaul's Drag Race. So sometimes they'll even use it when it wasn't that shady, right? That was this. It was like, oh, we've gone 5 minutes without playing that sound. Oh,
it was used pretty heavily. You're right.
I might go back, re-edit this whole thing, and just throw it in randomly through this entire conversation.
That'd be hilarious. Yeah.
That'd be worth it.
I don't know if you guys picked up on it too, but there were some instances where like characters were speaking in dialogue, and then all of a sudden the music would like overshadow like the vocal progression of the line. That happened with Tuco actually a lot. Like I think it was like 2 or 3 times he's talked, and then near the middle of his conversation, the music picks up, and I'm left like, well, what did he just say? I don't know. Like. Come on!
I think I can remember that very specifically when he's like recruiting the Mexican bandits at that like well thing, where he's like boiling the chicken. Where did he get the chicken from? Did anybody fucking get where he got the chicken from?
Got it from the egg.
Yeah, just picked it up on the side of the road. Yeah, so I can see why people would love it, and I'm sure that I have liked similar styled movies, but yeah, this one, it doesn't make me want to go back and watch more westerns.
No, it's just that the whole thing.
Million Ways to Die in the West. God.
Right. You want to do the questions then?
Let's do it.
All right. Favorite thing about the movie, Austin?
I need to separate this from another question because they're probably going to be the same, and I don't want to do that.
Fine. They can be the same.
The standoff at the end.
Okay.
The favorite part about the movie.
Justin?
That's fair. I'd agree with that as being my favorite scene for sure. But I will say that I really actually liked the music. I thought it was cool and iconic, which it is, and it's hard to separate from all the ways it's been used comically over the years. But I think that in this one, it didn't really distract me, and I felt what they kind of intended the viewer to feel with it. So the music, I think the score was probably my favorite element, and then looping in favorite scene, I'll say the standoff as well.
The thing that caught my attention about this movie, and there was not a lot.
The end. When it said the end, that was my
When it
favorite.
said the end, I was pumped. Was the just the look of it. Okay, so like I watched this in the office today. Normally I watch on the couch, so like I'm a lot further away from the TV when I'm watching it on my couch, right? And like some details and things just go miss sometimes because you're not as close to the screen. But like when that first scene with Angel Eyes comes up, and like just the look of it, I was like, man, one, there's no replacing film. Like just that look is so clean. It is digitized so well. The colors and the content, like everything is beautiful. So that was my favorite thing. And I'll give my favorite scene is when Tuco's making the gun. what was that? That was
Yeah.
so funny. Like he's like, oh, and then like you're just like I didn't understand. Like I thought it was better that it was clicking faster, but I guess not because it'll skip. I don't know. I didn't look up the science as to why he wanted a gun that wouldn't click as fast. But
I
that
think
whole
he was taking all the good parts of all the shitty guns and making a good gun.
right.
With, like, the barrel here, the trigger here, and assembling an actual good revolver.
So that was cool. And then like when he's like, "How much?" and the guy says $20, and he goes, "No." And then, like, he hands him the wad of cash, and then he goes to take the booze, and then he's like, "No, I'm not that guy." Puts the booze back. Like, I'm like, okay, sweet. I don't know.
There were a couple funny moments too, like when Clint Eastwood's calling him an idiot. He's like, whenever Angel Eyes leaves the notes, he's like, "I'll see you at the cemetery, idiots." And Clint Eastwood's like, "It's for you." Like,
Yeah, it's for you.
yeah, there were a couple funnier moments. Yeah.
Also puts the closed door sign like in his mouth, like in that scene.
Oh yeah.
Like what?
Right.
He's like, come here.
For whatever reason. Yeah.
That scene was just so weird that it stood out to me, and I just was like genuinely obsessed with like the way it was playing out. Like I just really liked it. All right, least favorite thing in the movie.
It's time length. It's length. If they would have trimmed it, like I said, trimmed the beginning by a lot, and then played it, I felt like this would have been more enjoyable. And to Justin's point, I think this was an extended version. I think that pops up in the credits at the end, like the English extended version or something. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe if I watched the other version, it was shorter, maybe it'll be great. But
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I will also say that the least favorite thing for me about it was the bloated runtime of it. And again, if they had just cut out that first hour, I think I really would have enjoyed the rest of the movie. But there was just too many things that I was not into that distracted from the main story. So that was for me.
I think for me it was continuity and plot holes. Like I couldn't even start to begin, and you guys know, like I obsess over like you have to say the main character's name in the first 5 minutes, kind of thing, right? You need to like repeat their names at least 6 times before you start referring to them as him, she, you, blah blah blah, because that helps the average viewer understand like who's who and why, what's going on, right? There was none of that. The plot didn't make any sense. Why did they blow up the bridge? Like, why is the war involved? What towns are they in? We have no idea if they're going to the same town or a different town, or like we're just totally bad plot, terrible. What's next? Favorite character?
That's a tricky one because
yeah,
they all kind of suck. Like,
Right.
and they bounce around different sides, and they're all pretty much shitty people. I mean, I guess I don't even want to say Clint Eastwood. It's like he was probably the coolest, but who was I don't know. I think they were all pretty evenly
if I
middle
had
of the road.
if I had to pick one, I'll say Blondie, because like you said, he's the coolest one, and he does have some jarring lines in it
Yeah.
that make it a little bit more enjoyable. And what he does at the end, I'm just like, that's funny. So I'll go with him.
Yeah. And it is cool that he's, like unflappable and kind of a badass. And Angel Eyes is like, I could have tortured you, but you're not going to give it up, right? It's like, no. So I'll say Blondie for his coolness, I guess.
Mine's Tuco, and I think it's just because that was the character I just attempted to associate with. Because at some point in time, I just decided like I'm gonna pick one of these guys. I'm gonna be a fan of them, and that guy had the most screen time, so I'm gonna like try to be cool with him.
Nice.
You want to do recast?
I couldn't even tell you who was like alive back then.
It was a bit tough.
Okay, and then so the score, your overall score.
Austin, do you have yours on deck? You ready?
Yeah, I'll go with mine.
Go. Yeah.
4.2. And I feel like most of that is to its vintageness and how it's received by film and critics today as being one of the most, if not the most popular spaghetti western of all time. If it was a shorter runtime, had a better plot, and better character association, it would be up there, but it's not. So 4.2.
Cool. Dustin?
Yeah, I'm trying to, like when we did Evil Dead, I accounted for what it meant to that genre and the history of film, and everything. So I'm trying to give it a fair grade for that. I don't know if I can go higher than a 4 or 5. Like, if I said 5, it would only be taking into cinema history account. Personally, I'm going to give it a 4. And, again, I enjoyed the last 20 minutes immensely. I think it should have been trimmed down, and I'll say a 4.5. I don't ever do in-between whole numbers, but I'm going to say a 4.5 on this one.
I think that's fair, though, that, like, I don't even think it deserves to be a 5 because, like, let's look at its cinema importance is like, okay, so it inspired Tarantino, right? So, like, at the end of the day, Tarantino is not necessarily, like, Spielberg, right? Or, like, even, like, a Michael Bay, where he's made blockbuster after blockbuster. Like, there's plenty of people on this planet who will never see a Quentin Tarantino movie, right? And then, other than that, the score, right? And, like, the style of the movie are used as parody. It's not even like it's something like Jaws or E.T. where it's so iconic that people just respect it. It's like people use it as a joke.
Well, now they do, but, at the time, that was a hugely popular genre. Like, Gunsmoke was one of the longest-running TV shows of all time back in the 50s and early 60s, I think. So, I think it's just so far away from our time that it's, yeah. What did your dad ever say why he liked it so much, or was he just like, you just know that he liked it and he didn't say too much about it?
I think was only allowed to watch westerns for whatever reason. Like, I remember he was not allowed to watch the 60s Batman movies, or TV shows, but he was allowed to watch this.
Interesting.
Like, they thought, for whatever his parents thought, that was too violent. The Batman movies and TV show was too violent. And that this was fun. John Wayne was fun.
Right. Well, that would have been that older style of westerns, I suppose, like we talked about. So that's interesting.
I'm gonna give it a 3 too. Certainly is not for the party.
No movie is, right?
No. Well,
no movie is.
I don't know. We'll find out as we continue down this path. But yeah, man, like, you put into account that Alfred Hitchcock was doing movies around the same time and earlier, and I'll watch a Hitchcock movie and be obsessed with it. This does not hold me.
Sure, 100%. Well, I appreciate you guys sticking through the big-ass runtime on this, and I don't think it was too easy for any of us, but it's still, something different to talk about, so appreciate you guys sticking through it, not fast-forwarding.
Well, here's the deal. I'm up, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will bet my life savings that this movie has Tom Hardy in it. I know that it will. Just tell me what it is. It's gotta have to, yeah.
But this is 2 hours and 16 minutes, so a much shorter movie. From 1999, the Wachowski brothers were going with the Matrix.
Oh boy. The OG Matrix.
Pumped.
I haven't seen it in so long. Oh my god.
Wow.
It's another, classic that I've never seen.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm excited to dig into that, and
awesome.
all of them are on Netflix right now. So hopefully it sends me down a dark rabbit hole.
I think you are going to absolutely love The Matrix.
Yes.
Knowing you and knowing that movie, I think you're going to love it.
Of course, what was the movie you also thought I was going to love, and I just ripped it apart the entire time?
Oh, Social Network. Yeah, that's true.
That's
yeah.
But
you'll come around. I'm telling you, you'll come around.
There's guns and fighting in this one, so I'm sure I will.
It's crazy. It's unlike anything that I can even think of.
And
So.
Keanu Reeves is in it, and we all know that he's the greatest actor ever. So it's behind Tom Hardy and
Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd. And,
That's right.
what's the other? Who's the Peaky Blinders guy? Who I'm always
Cillian Murphy.
Cillian Murphy.
Yeah.
The big three: Paul Rudd, Cillian Murphy, and Tom Hardy.
Very solid.
All right. Well, that concludes thoughts from the movies. We will be back next Wednesday with The Matrix. So we'll see you then.
Later.
Later.